Hello everyone, welcome back to another video. Masjid Al-Aqsa is the third holiest site in Islam and Muslims' first direction of prayer. Muslims used to visit Al-Aqsa when they were performing pilgrimage to Mecca, but that stopped being possible after Israel occupied it in 1967. Ever since Israel's establishment, the so-called Jewish state tried to take over Jerusalem by force. They failed in 1948 following fierce Arab resistance, but succeeded in 1967. Zionists made numerous attempts ever since to take control over Al-Aqsa compound. They started digging underneath it almost immediately in hopes to find anything relating the compound to Solomon's temple. 60 years on, they failed miserably and all of their attempts were fruitless. However, that did not stop Israel from continuously trying to take over the compound, primarily by making it increasingly more difficult for people, primarily Muslims, to visit it. And here's some of the things that they do. Number one, they have safety checks in each entry of Al-Aqsa, and they ask for people's IDs, religious backgrounds, reasons for visit, etc. If they fail any of those security parameters, they ban them from entering. Number two, they ban most Palestinians from the West Bank and Gaza from entering altogether. Number three, they allow settlers to enter the compound without permission or approval from the Waqf, settlers who regularly harass the people who worship in Al-Aqsa. Number four, they attack the compound frequently, just like they did a couple of days ago, mostly during Ramadan. They constantly provoke and attack worshippers and make life more difficult for them, in many cases without any reason whatsoever. Number five, they ban popular Muslim scholars from entering and completely close the compound whenever they wish, limiting who can and cannot visit the compound and pray. It's very difficult to draw comparison in the Western world to portray what's happening in Al-Aqsa, primarily because of its historical, religious, and political situation. However, if you imagine a foreign army invading London, taking over St. Paul's Cathedral, placing foreign guards outside of it, questioning every Christian who wants to go in and worship, and banning them, allowing supremacist foreigners to go and visit the compound, and imagine for a second this foreign force using armed force against Christian worshippers inside the compound, harassing them, brutally attacking them, and killing some of them. Imagine that just for 1 second. It doesn't obviously reflect the actual situation in Al-Aqsa, but that's something that can probably resemble a part of it. That's the reality of Masjid Al-Aqsa and Jerusalem, and that's what happened in the past couple of days. You had police forces entering not just the compound, they entered the actual mosque. They attacked people, they beat them brutally, they arrested them, and they humiliated them for no valid reason. And this is no extraordinary occurrence. They do that very regularly. Just a couple of years ago, we had similar images from Al-Aqsa, and every now and then, they always harass Muslim worshippers and make life difficult for them. That's the twisted reality that we live in Jerusalem, not only under the current fascist regime, but under every Israeli regime since Israel's establishment. Just a few days ago, a Palestinian citizen of Israel, his name is Muhammad Al-Usaybi, he was a recent graduate, so he became a doctor. He came back to visit his family. He went to Masjid Al-Aqsa and he saw the Israeli forces brutally beating a girl. He tried to stop them, and they shot him 10 times without him even attacking them, trying to take their weapons or having anything on them. that was of immediate risk to them. They had at least four cameras surrounding the scene, including body cams on the security forces, yet they refused to publish any of those video recordings. It was another murder, another heartbroken mother, another devastated family and friends. Over 112 casualties so far this year, over 95 Palestinians, over 17 Israelis who were victims of the Israeli brutality, murder, occupation, and complete impunity. And let me talk about impunity for a second here. The UK Foreign Secretary released a statement following the recent Israeli brutality in Jerusalem. He said the following, James Cleverly, quote, "The UK condemns the indiscriminate rocket attacks from southern Lebanon and Gaza and recognizes Israel's right to self-defense. Now is the time for all parties across the region to de-escalate tensions." What he should have said, what he should really have said, is the following. The rockets from Gaza and Lebanon are a retaliation for an occupying force that has been mercilessly occupying, murdering, and stealing lands for the past 75 years. They were a response to a severe provocation in one of Islam's holiest sites. The Palestinians and the Lebanese have a right to defend themselves against ongoing oppression and threats from Israel. Now is the time for the British government to apologize for its shameful history and role in establishing Israel and backing its oppressive regime against the native Palestinians. He ended his statement by saying, quote, "Peace will only be sustainable if both Israelis and Palestinians recommit themselves to a negotiated settlement, leading to a two-state solution of a secure Israel side by side with a viable Palestinian state." Note, that's end quote. Note, secure Israel and viable Palestinian state. What he should have said was, you cannot portray Israel and Palestine as if they are equal. Israel is the occupying force with all the power. It has expanded so much into 1967 territories that it made the two-state solution impossible. Now is the time to take effective measures against Israel until it gives Palestinians between the Jordan River to the sea their full equal rights. That's what he should have said. Where is the talk about invasion, seeing as this is happening in territories that are internationally recognized as occupied? Why do you not implement sanctions on Israel, but rather host its military companies, military industrial companies in the UK, and you recently welcomed its Prime Minister? Where are the calls for the right of Palestinians to resist, and where are the calls to support their resistance, their just resistance? Why do you not implement the same policies you do towards Russia against Israel? Last I checked the English dictionary, the words resistance, occupation, and sanctions still had the same meaning on, before, and after Feb 24th, 2022. So what is it exactly that makes the government actions and calls for action legally binding? Why should the public comply when they're told to sympathize and support X and not Y, when both X and Y suffer from the same things? Occupation, killing, and injustice. We have witnessed numerous occasions where the government, from the Prime Minister to members of Parliament to ministers, engage in illegal conduct. Tony Blair took a whole country to an illegal war, and he received no punitive measures. In fact, he was awarded a knighthood. And with the Conservatives, not only that, many of them very proudly state that they're Zionists, Their ideological idols made no secret of their racist views against Palestinians amongst other nations. Winston Churchill called Palestinians barbaric hordes. In fact, in one of his most famous quotes, he said, quote, "I do not apologize for the takeover of the region by the Jews from the Palestinians in the same way I don't apologize for the takeover of America by the whites from the Red Indians or the takeover of Australia from the blacks. It is natural for a superior race to dominate an inferior one." End quote. That's Winston Churchill. That's a direct admission that the land belonged to the Palestinians and was taken over by the Jews from someone who contributed primarily in giving the country to the Jews. So I ask the following: does the current leadership in 2023 in Britain still abide by these statements? The current political paradigm of war and peace contains numerous flaws that are not only illegal but reprehensible. This isn't new. The same party that supports Israeli apartheid supported South African apartheid, defended it, and demonized anyone who criticized it. Nelson Mandela, a worldwide peace icon, was a terrorist in their view. And although such view may have only changed above the surface and not beneath it, it wasn't until consistent worldwide popular resistance that the state policies started to change when it came to South Africa. The same needs to be done with Israel, but we're not there yet, and for several reasons. Number one, Israel and Zionism's malicious weaponization of anti-Semitism and their persistent inclusion of Israel with any debate surrounding anti-Semitism. This requires several notes. A. Israel hasn't, does not, and will not represent Jewish people. Many Jews across the spectrum, whether religious or secular, reject the notion of the Jewish state and oppose even Israel's right to exist. B. Anti-Semitism is not limited to Jews. In fact, most, if not all, Israeli Jews are not Semites, as in natives to the Semitic region or the Semitic people. C. The criticism of a state does not constitute criticism of its inhabitants, its religion, or culture. For example, if you criticize Germany under the Christian Democratic Union, you do not criticize Christianity. Number two, Israeli Hasbara. This term, and I spoke about it previously, is used to describe Israeli manipulation and explanation to its actions. It's basically used to primarily sugarcoat Israel's constant crimes, whether through the popular media, social media, lobbying, or any other means, and billions are spent on it annually. Number three, the corporations benefiting from the conflict. As with any conflict, there are major benefactors. Israel receives billions of dollars in support from US taxpayers in exchange for spending the money on American weapons. This must stop. Corporations are corrupting politics to the highest levels, directing and instigating global conflicts and manipulating popular response for their own greed. Number four, government's unconditional support of Israel. Most, if not all, Western countries support Israel unconditionally, despite its heinous historical record and ongoing atrocities. This makes popular demand against Israel less effective and requires more pressure to be put on it, including persistent popular resistance to such policies until governments change their ways. Writing to your MP does nothing really when your MP is a brainwashed imbecile, a proud Zionist, or a friend of Israel. And last point holds the key to the real change: ongoing resistance through various means, whether by talking, writing, posting, sharing, participating in action groups, activities, arts, music, and any other effective medium. These activities must never stop until we see noticeable results. Condemning is not enough. Calling upon is not enough. Any subpar measure is not enough. People need to keep moving until action is taken. Ultimatums followed by measurable actions that make it untenable for Israel to continue its injustice against the Palestinians. Until we end the occupation, until we end the apartheid, until we end the injustice, and until the Palestinian people get the rights that they deserve.